Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you had a good break, and that did possibly involve some Kit Kats. No? Any Kit Kats on the break? No? Christmas, all happy? No lumps of coal in the stockings? Yeah? Good. Good to hear. So we're going to be doing a wee journey, and our journey takes us, dare I say it, beyond sight and sound, into the elasticity zone, to which there should be spooky music playing at that particular time. Those of you who've been around since the 60s will be well aware. Right, so first up we need to know what elasticity is. Okay? So the very first definition that we must have is what elasticity is. Our definition for elasticity there is about responsiveness. How responsive is quantity demanded to a change in price? Now it's very definite, okay? We need to make sure that we have that as an understanding. We need to make sure that if we are ever asked, define elasticity, we're able to do it. In this case, we are going to be thinking about 3 different types of elasticity. Not 1, but 3. So we are going to need to keep all of that content bubbling around in our head, and we are going to need to make sure that we are effectively using it and understanding it. So when we looked at the law of demand, we worked out that when the price was to rise, the quantity demanded would decrease. We are quite happy with that. But what we didn't ask was by how much. That is the one question that we didn't ask. And as you've been discovering when you've been thinking about your particular IAs, your C1, okay, discussing the impact of price changes, possible price changes on products with a negative consumption externality, you might have noticed that there were some elasticity issues. How responsive are consumers to the price change, right? So the classic example we would discuss would be elastic bands. Very responsive, very elastic. So if you were to take a bungee jump, jumping off a tower, all right, what you are hopeful for is that the responsiveness of the rope tied around your ankles is very responsive. All right. What you probably don't want is a solid steel chain attached to your ankles when you jump off the bridge. That might not end so well for you. We okay? Good, sir. Are we okay? Because we don't seem ready for lessons. We just seem to be in quiet contemplation. So you've got your definition for elasticity down?
Yep.
Fantastic. That's really good to hear. The first one that we're going to look at is called price elasticity of demand. It goes by the code name PED. All right? Which is pretty exceptional, David. Price elasticity of demand. That's... Hey? That's one of the first times I've seen you laugh, by the way, just saying. It's only been 3 years. The demand curve is what we're going to say it is going to be inelastic or relatively inelastic if the change that we see is less than proportional. All right? So math magicians in the room, you're already working these sorts of things out, proportionality. So if it is 100% with regards to the price change, but only 80% with regards to the quantity change, then that is less than proportional. All right. If it is 100% price change and 120% quantity change, that would be more than proportional. So in that case, it would be considered to be relatively elastic. All right. Now, these are terms and terminologies that you need to be able to use. proportionality, proportion, and the idea of relative elasticity or relative inelasticity, and having an understanding of what they mean. If something is relatively elastic, there will be a greater than proportional change when the price changes. If something is relatively inelastic, there's going to be a relatively less proportional change in the quantity demanded as the price changes. So this is the application of the theory. So the definition, that was the first bit that we saw. Okay, now this is the application of it. We need to also think about some examples. We're going to be looking at different case studies, some of which are going to be a little bit complicated to understand, all right? But we are going to be thinking about real life case studies. So what products might be more elastic? What products might be more inelastic? All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you about 30 seconds just with the people sitting nearby you, and you need to come up with examples of products that your table thinks might be more elastic and your table thinks might be more inelastic. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask, and I would like an answer, which is the American way of saying answer. All right, ready? 30 seconds on the clock, starting now. Yeah, you might have some problems. You might want to jump across to the other table. That will be chance. I know they're males, but that's okay. Right, that's okay. You can add a bit of iron to their diet. Yeah, you can be the female. Iron. All right, 30 seconds running down, gentlemen. We need examples of elastic goods that you think will be elastic, and examples of goods that you personally feel might be more inelastic. Try and discuss them as a table. See what your tables can come up with. Oh. All right, 10 seconds, winding down. Have some thoughts.
Let's just say water.
Preferably about what we're talking about. Not about what you're going to do this afternoon or the food you're going to have for supper.
Yeah, it's like 여기서 이만.
근데 일라스틱은 몰라. 그냥 정반대로 하는 거죠. 물에 정반대로.
All right, and ladies and gentlemen, let us see what answers
There's so many like
we have come up with.
이 회사에서 나온 거라.
So, at the top table,
이거를 살 거 아니야.
Rush at your table, good sir. What examples did you come up with for possibly, what about elastic goods? What did you come up with?
Elastics, we said consumables, so things such as foods and drinks, because there are substitutes that you didn't have.
Okay.
And then for inelastic, we said drugs, alcohol, tobacco.
Okay. And up here at this top table, which I'm tempted to call the Korean table because that seems to be how we explain things to one another.
We have a Japanese.
Wow, you sit there conversing in Korean, you know. What do we think, gentlemen?
We came to a conclusion that necessities are usually more inelastic because you need them in life. It's not like if price rises, you can't not buy this. Yeah. But like food such as like curry might be a bit more elastic because there's other substitutes that you could buy.
Addictive,
Luxury.
necessity, luxury, those two, and addictive, non-addictive.
Yeah, that too.
Okay.
This is inelastic.
All right. Gentlemen at the back, what did we think of? Elastic goods, inelastic goods? What did we come up with?
So what we thought of like rice as elastic, since rice is something that's essential, it's one of the essentials.
Okay.
But something like chocolate, I don't think that's an elastic. It's not like needed so much. It's like a
Good. Very good. Well done. Did you notice that the team at the back, Russia's team, still feverishly in debate, were quite broad with their understanding. They talked about consumables, but you just mentioned chocolate. Chocolate actually is a consumable. Interesting. So being quite specific and quite purposeful in your definitions, but also in your identification of examples. So rather than a broad brush and say consumables, chocolate or chocolate bars or chocolate ice creams, or as opposed to rice, which was a very specific and really good example to use. All right. Let's have a closer look. It's got the binoculars.
Wait, didn't AI make this?
Yeah. The images, yes.
Oh. I
Yeah.
thought they made the entire slideshow.
No, heck no. I put the slideshow. No.
That would have been cool.
No.
Wait, is that Google slide? Is that Google slide? Or?
No. This is Canva.
Oh.
We are slightly moving away now from Google. If Google doesn't catch up, I think that there will be a future without Google with regards to presentation and writing and everything.
Google doesn't catch up.
Well, Google at this point isn't using AI to the level that some of these other programs are. I mean, at the moment, at any rate, Canva is free. Its pro version is free for education.
Oh, actually?
Yes.
What?
Wait,
All right. So I'm able to use DALL-E. I'm able to use DID inside Canva. I'm able to use Imagen. All of those AI-based programs I can use inside here. All right, and there's one that's going to come up in a minute that you might go, oh, that's interesting. All right, and it's the AI doing it. So I just tell it what image I want, and it creates the image, and then I can put it in, and then it's already pre-packaged as a presentation. At the moment, for Google, you have to create it outside with a different app, and then try and figure out how to put it in, and then So this does the whole thing for you, right? More or less. And there are more things that it can do that I'm not doing. All right, there are more things. Right? For example, it has AI in the slides. So if I've written something in a slide and I think, oh no, that's not quite good, I can get the AI to rewrite it for me. Rewrite this more simply. And it'll do that. While still being inside the slide. So if you have a look at those two demand curves, as you discovered in your IAC1, it makes quite a big difference. Now, elasticity is not the slope. We need to make sure that you understand that, and the math magicians in the room are going to pretty quickly figure out why. Elasticity is not the slope, but there is a relationship. All right. As you see, if you are more elastic, there is less slope. If you are more inelastic, there is more slope. Now there's a rule that we discuss with regards to this, and we did it in IGCSE, so some of you will be familiar with this particular law, and it has to do with the extremes. Okay? So the idea is how to visually identify these curves. If the curve more resembles the letter I, then it is considered to be more inelastic. If the curve resembles more the letter E, then it is considered to be more elastic. All right? That's how it's going to work. And we will see examples of that very soon. But you can see there the idea of the proportions. So there's the percentage change in price being considerably bigger than the percentage change in the quantity. So that one is more inelastic. Over here, you see the percentage change in the price and the percentage change in the quantity, but the percentage change in the quantity is actually bigger than the percentage change in the price. So that one there is elastic, looking more like the letter E. This one here is more inelastic, looking more like the letter I. Now again, for those of you who have been doing this game for a little while, you might remember the kinesthetic action game from IGSI, alright, where you would use your arm to identify. So straight up and down, vertical, inelastic, elastic, relatively. Alright? And that was, we developed that in New Zealand, and it was to help learners during an exam very quickly. Okay, which one is it? Alright? And they would do it. And you would see them in the exam, alright, moving their arm to try and work out whether it was elastic or inelastic. If that works, use it. Alright? Part of the game that we play is this education thing of, if this works for you, use it. If you are a kinesthetic learner, you need to use physical things in order to help you to learn. Alright? Which was quite common in New Zealand.
That's how I actually remember.
Alright, so the formula. Alright, so you've got definition and application comes twice because you've also got the application of formula, which means, yes, ladies and gentlemen, you will have to calculate this. PED has to be calculated. Did you notice that this is a mathematical formula? Yeah? Canva does that for you. There is a separate app in Canva that will create mathematical formulas, and they can be really complicated ones, and it will create them for you and put them in there, which is much better than the bad old days when you were having to try and type the stupid thing out and try and make it resemble somehow a formula. That formula is for you to remember. Unlike some other subjects that shan't be named, math, right? You are not going to get given a cheat sheet. There are no formula sheets for economics. You need to remember every single thing right here in the filing cabinet. Now, in the future, yes, I am anticipating your exams to be going online. Yes, I am. However, I believe that to be a 5-year plan, so it won't affect you. All right, but eventually, yes, your exams are going to be online, and I would predict your exams are also going to be modular. All right, and I will predict that your certification will come from that modular learning, and it will be quite an interesting change that will happen. And it's starting now. They're doing trials now with regards to all of that, but that unfortunately won't be you. All right, because it's happening too quick. For that sort of thing to happen. So you're going to need to remember the calculation. You're going to need to remember how to use it. Now in New Zealand, there was a very common error that was made with regards to this particular calculation. Anybody like to tell me what the problem was that students had with it? Have a look at the formula and compare it to the definition. See if that helps. Yeah, calculating percentages is fun, and if you are non-mathematical and worried about how to calculate a percentage, you will need to learn how to calculate percentages. Yes, absolutely. And yes, there are definitely students who struggle with that first step. Absolutely, and it is always a concern, particularly when you get to your level and you can't work out how to calculate a percentage. All right? No, but believe it or not, that isn't the biggest problem that students would have. When you look at the definition, price elasticity, responsiveness, the quantity demanded to a change in the price. Yeah. So it's that idea of dependent and independent variables again. Because you've got your quantity demanded at the top of the equation. Price is at the bottom. The mistake students make is to do it the other way around and put price at the top of the equation and quantity demanded at the bottom. That is a mistake. That is an error. It is the most common mistake students make. All right? To the extent where in New Zealand we came up with a little wee saying. You may remember it. Yes, the queen is always higher than the princess. All right? That is how we know the Q is always above the P. All right? Now, there is another one that I saw in the digital textbook, which is that you have to Q before you P. Yeah. All right? Okay. Which is... Okay. Which either way works. If you remember it based on the royals, the queen is higher than the princess or the prince. Right? Not being genderist. Okay? Or if you want to remember it about queuing before you P, whatever it takes, you can't make that mistake. Okay? These are easy marks to get because it's just a calculation. And you're going to get between 2 and 4 marks for it in your paper 2, possibly paper 3, depending on whether you are HL or not. All right? It is entirely possible. So what do we need to think about? What rules are there to the application? One of the biggest rules, and this is also, from me to you, is that it's important that you always be positive. See what it did there? No? No? You got to be positive, and this here has to be positive. It's always positive, okay? And you know that it's always positive because there's a wee mathematical trick that we apply. It is called an absolute value, which isn't in your syllabus anymore, but that's what it is, okay? The demand curve is always downward sloping, always, right? It's downward sloping, so it's going to be a negative change, more or less. Okay, so we just ignore the negative sign. When you do the calculation, just ignore it. It's not there. If you write negative in your answers in the exam, it's actually going to be wrong. Okay, because again, mathematically, there's a big difference between the negative value and the positive value. Quite a significant one might suggest. So it's always got to be positive. Okay. Other rules there, what do we got here? If the coefficient is greater than 1, it is more than proportional, therefore it is elastic. Right, the word coefficient, that's the math speak. That's the terminology that we use to describe the answer to the equation. So when you type the numbers in and you get an answer, how you describe that answer is you say, this is a coefficient. The PED coefficient is, if it is greater than 1, that means it is more than proportional. The other rule says that if it's less than 1, it's inelastic. What if it's equal to 1? What does it say?
It is unit elastic.
It is unitary elastic or unit elastic. All right, you remember this one, that old-fashioned word for 1 is unit? Yeah? Okay. So if it exactly equals 1, it's proportional. It is exactly proportional. 10% equaling 10%, 20%, 20%, 30%, 30%. Whatever price change is occurring, the exact copy of that percentage change is occurring with the quantity demanded. It is exactly proportional. So you describe that as being unitary elastic. Now, quite clearly, there are 3 different possible options that you can have with any demand curve. They can be relatively elastic, they can be relatively inelastic, and they could possibly be unitary. But you did start to talk about goods like, you said that there might be goods that are necessities. Some of you talked about necessities before. And some of you hinted at the idea of luxuries before. We are going to discuss all of those. And they're going to have slightly different effects potentially, depending on how we apply them and the extent to which we apply them. All right, those are our rules. Now, what do you think about unitary elastic? Now, if you had examples before, you had chocolate and you had rice, is it going to be possible to come up with an example of a unitary elastic good? I'm going to give you 30 seconds to see if you can come up with an example of a unit elastic good. Ready? Go.
Is there any elastic?
정확히
It's 너무 theoretical 한가?
I'm going to start a band.
Like how do you exactly measure the elasticity? 어떤 컴퍼니가
And about 10 more seconds.
그런 게 있나?
너무
Welcome to the world of high pressure.
I don't think elasticity 다 너무 theoretical. 왜냐면은 이거 말고도 다른 팩터들이 너무
All right, okay, that was your 30 seconds. Russia's table. What do we think? Well, I shouldn't say what do we think because, to be honest, I'm not sure I actually want to know what some of you think. Do we have any examples? Did you, as a team, a collective unit, a hive mind, so to speak, did you come up with any possible case studies for unit elastic? Water is a suggestion.
water.
Maybe.
Come on.
Maybe. We'll see.
Unit elastic.
Okay, table at the back. Did we come up with any examples? You seem to all look at Naheed.
그게 250에 하나면
Air as unit elastic. Okay. How often do you buy it? Don't buy it? Okay. Maybe sort of circumstances that you would need to buy air, but and next table. What do we think?
So I think you should explain.
Do I going to explain it through the medium of dance? No? That's just
So
Junwon.
unit elasticity should only happen when there's a fixed revenue that you can gain from, right?
A fixed revenue.
Because regardless of what the price and quantity
Yes, you're on the right path.
you
Yeah,
should have a fixed revenue of something.
yes. So what does that tell you about the good?
So I'm trying to think of a good where it has a fixed revenue.
Yes. It's hard, isn't it? That's why I asked you, because I thought after lunch.
What if you only produce a single good, like one good? It's just like this is like the only good that they produce.
But then does it become more inelastic?
Yeah.
Pardon?
Does it then become more inelastic? Because there's no substitutes for it. Right, it's the same idea with water. If water becomes an inelastic good because there are no substitutes for it.
Is money unitary elastic? Can we say money is
Oh, that's an interesting point. How much demand is there for money? Do you buy money? You do in some cases. I know I bought money.
Yeah, because like when you go like to a place for like tourism, for example, you have to buy.
Right, and if we were to represent these concepts giraphically, here's a couple of extremes. And here we run back to that idea before, where we talked about the letter E, the letter I. All right? So this looks more elastic. This looks more inelastic. All right? So there you have what is called the extreme end of this particular application. If you can find a product that is perfectly elastic. What about a product that is perfectly inelastic? What sorts of goods are they? And then unit elastic again, there it is. that's what it will look like. Well, one of the depictions of what it will look like, being exactly proportional. And mathematically, do we know the shape? It's what it's supposed to look like at any rate?
Hyperbola.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a rectangular hyperbola for the mathematicians in the room. That's what it's supposed to be. Bonus points if you can identify the economist at the bottom of the picture.
Is that you?
It's definitely not me.
Adam Smith.
No, it's not Adam Smith.
Richard Thaler.
No.
Just guessing.
Just guessing.
Well, famous, yeah.
Keynesian.
Bonus points, go and waiting.
Who's a Keynesian?
Mr. Elastic guy.
Right, now, elastic, perfectly elastic goods. So what that tells us is it doesn't matter what quantity you demand. Price doesn't change. It's not going to change, not at all. Now we are going to have examples, where that is the case. One of the ones that we're going to spend a bit of time on is goods that are traded internationally. If it is an international market and you are the small player buying the good, you have no influence over the price, so it doesn't matter how many of them you want to buy, the price isn't going to change at all because it's set by the world market. So a number of goods that are internationally traded could potentially be perfectly elastic. You've also got ones that are perfectly inelastic. Now, we've mentioned some of those before. You mentioned rice before. If you view the product to be an absolute necessity, something that you cannot live without, it's going to be perfectly inelastic. Yeah? Whether that is because you are addicted to it and therefore cannot cope without it. Yeah? Don't look at me and Coca-Cola. All right? Or Red Bull. All right? Or M&Ms. All right? Don't think about those sorts of things, but it might be that way for you. Or it might just, I don't know, an essential medicine that you have to have. Otherwise, I guess life stops. Yeah? Maybe the air example that we had. Yeah, air would be an absolute necessity. Without it, you kind of struggle a bit. All right? Unless you want to randomly develop photosynthesis. Yeah. No, I don't think that happens necessarily. All right, so I'm going to give you 30 seconds and you can see if... No, I've given you that. You don't need that. All right, now, here's a trick. And this trick is a secret squirrel.
God, it's a squirrel.
This trick is only for HL learners. So if you are an SL learner, you can switch those parts of the brain that you are currently operating with off. All right? Yeah, just because there's just one or two. So you can turn those off. You can stare vaguely into space. Gaze into Russia's eyes, whatever it is that you choose to do. If you are an HL learner, you must pay attention to this. Okay. Magics occurs, and this is the reason why elasticity is different from slope. Okay, your elasticity, your PED, is going to vary depending on where you calculate it on the demand curve. All right. At the top end of your demand curve, your PED is going to be more inelastic. At the bottom end of your demand curve, your PED is going to be more elastic. And in the middle, right there, as magic tells us, it is unit elastic. Your PED varies depending on where you check along the demand curve.
So it looks like this. I'm sorry, from your perspective.
No, it looks like that. Yes, it is a curve, so yes, it is going to look a little bit unusual perhaps.
Like this curve, right?
Yes, it's more curved.
But like, inflated this way, right?
No, it should still be curved like that. Should still be more rectangular as a curve. All right. Now that means there that you can see the obvious connection there with business, because at certain points your demand curve is going to be more inelastic. At other points your demand curve is going to be more elastic. So when you're making your pricing decisions, all right, the effect, the impact on quantity demanded is going to be different depending on where you are on the demand curve. Yeah? Which is a significant thing, because then your price changes is going to have an effect on your revenues, which is going to have an effect on your profits. All right? And that, as we know, is potentially what you've gotten into business for. And HL learners, this is going to come back again. All right? Because eventually we are going to look at, in the next week or so, depending how quickly we get through this topic, annual presentations, we are going to look at an HL only section.
Yay.
And that HL only section is going to be on a market failure topic called market power, and part of that is going to be about the slope of the demand curve and the relative elasticities along, or the relative PED along the curve, and the impact that that might have. All right. Okay.
I don't know how I feel about that.
So HL learners, we okay with that so far? No? Well, there's a closer look.
Wait, so when you draw the line, it's still a straight line?
If you're drawing it as a straight line, it's going to look like that.
But what's the realistic way to draw it?
A curve.
Like a bent curve?
There is a bend to it, yes. But it is, as before, like the unit elastic curve, it is more of a rectangular hyperbola. Not exactly rectangular hyperbola, but it will look more like it than that.
So that oh. Wait, would it look similar to PPC curve?
No, I think it's reverse PPC.
Yeah, a reverse one.
But the thing is, if when it's close to the y-axis, if the PD is infinity, it's like this. It needs to be this. 왜냐하면 저기서 quantity가 x-axis인데 quantity over this price, right?
Yes. Yes, and there's the mathematical problem again with regards to dependent and independent variables. Yes.
So when it's touching the price axis, it should be a flat line.
Yes, it should be.
Also, it should look like it should look like PPC then, right?
Still going to look that way. Yes.
If it looks like this, then having this line is inelastic, but at the y-axis it should be as elastic, perfectly
Isn't it
elastic,
should be
right?
like PPC?
So it should be a PPC then, not like a reverse PPC. Like, can I draw it?
I know what you're getting at. Yeah, that is a good question. I have always done it on the point of view that it isn't that way, that it is more of a rectangular hyperbola, because that makes sense the way my brain works. All right, that there is an inelastic portion at the top and then an elastic portion at the bottom, and therefore it meets in the middle as being unitary elastic, which does resemble that rectangular hyperbola. But I can see what you're getting at. Yeah?
So the closer it gets to the quantity side,
Yes.
the axis, does the demand get more inelastic?
Yes, it's going to go up that way, isn't it?
Or to the quantity side?
The quantity's this one, yes.
So it becomes more inelastic, right?
No, more elastic this way.
So then it says the PD when it's touching is 0.
Oh, sorry. Yes, apologies, you're right. More elastic and then more inelastic. You are absolutely right. Yes.
But then an inelastic curve looks like this, right?
Yes.
A vertical line.
Yes.
So it should look
If it's perfectly elastic, yes.
like it should be like a PPC curve, right?
I'm still,
That shape.
the way my brain works, and it may be different from the way your brain works, it still works out to be a rectangular hyperbola, or close to.
Can I draw it then?
You're welcome to draw things. Right up there.
So if you draw a line, and then since this is an inelastic curve,
Yes.
you're saying it should look like this, right?
Yes.
But then when it's touching the quantity curve, if you differentiate it, you get this kind of curve, but that's elastic. That's perfectly elastic when you differentiate.
Yes.
But if you're saying that at the quantity side, that the PED is 0, which means it's inelastic, shouldn't it look like this? So when you differentiate it at this point, you get a perfectly inelastic curve at this point.
Gordon, Bennett. Okay. I will draw two.
Okay.
All right. Now, where this comes from is something that you don't learn, which might help. Yeah. Also might not. Remembering that the demand curve is a market demand curve, not an individual demand curve. Yeah. So we actually have, and we have a curve that goes like this, and then you're going to have curves that go like this,
Is that the math?
and then you're going to match up anywhere it hits. Looking the way I want it to go. Match it this way, then there's another one there, and there'll be another curve that might be there, and there's another curve that might be there. You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
Because each individual demand curve has its own elasticity, and then when you add them together, you're only adding them at one point. Yeah? Does that make sense to you now?
Yeah.
So, making it all together, you're going to end up with more of a rectangular hyperbola. But, yeah, it's what's called isoquantity and isocost. And you've got what's called a budget constraint. So you are building your demand curve up, looking at the individuals, what their budget constraints are, and their individual preferences are, and then also what they are able to spend. So their preferences, which are tied to their wants and needs, and all of those sorts of behavioural patterns. And then you link that to their budget, and you figure out where on their wants they're actually able to afford, and that becomes your point.
Okay, so if we didn't want to draw a straight line, would the demand then, would the supply and demand curve look like this? Like both the hyperbola?
Yes. The other thing to ask yourself, because on more of a TOK basis, a lot of it doesn't exist because you're in a market. So you're actually at a market equilibrium. So the rest is just like quantum mechanics. The rest is just possibilities. But that market equilibrium price, that's the final price that the market has. So the rest is just possibility. Yeah, but that's going well out of what you need to know. Okay? But you also have to understand that we are always approaching things classically, and we are always going to find exceptions, like the ones that we saw just before, which are those ones, right? There are those exceptions, and then there are others as well. When we start looking at income elasticity, for example, we are going to see a demand curve that is upward sloping, which is different again. Okay? And again, everything is theory, everything is theoretical. We haven't taken behavioural economics anywhere near into account with regards to it. The closest we get is that idea of addiction and how that might possibly affect your preferences. Right? Good questions. Right, so now the next part of your application is to think about why the PED coefficient is where it is. And there are very specific determining factors that tell you that is why that number is what it is. And those we would refer to usually as determinants. So in this case, determinants of PED. So the first one is, as you've already discussed when you were thinking of examples before, how many substitutes are there? If there are a lot of substitutes, what does that mean? If there aren't many substitutes, what does that mean? All right, which one would be more elastic, which one would be more inelastic? But then you also have to look at the substitute itself. Because as a wise economics professor once told me, everything is a substitute. Okay? You also then have to consider how close they are to each other as substitutes. All right? It's about how you choose to spend your money, because it's demand. So you could spend your money in all manner of ways. Okay? My son buys imaginary money to buy imaginary coins in a game, in a video game. All right? And I'm like, okay. Or he uses real money to buy imaginary money to buy whatever in a game. Yeah? Which makes perfect sense to him. Absolute perfect sense. But if I was to try and explain what that actually was to my father, right, he would get quite confused, okay, as to where the actual product is. Yeah? And my gran, well, no. Right? When she was alive, she couldn't, she could barely cope with 3 television channels, right? And the understanding of the internet was just whoosh, out there. So this idea of number of substitutes, how many substitutes, if there's lots of substitutes, is it going to be more elastic or more inelastic?
If it's more substitutes?
More substitutes, what do you think?
Elastic.
More elastic. So the larger the number of substitutes, the more elastic potentially it is. But you've also got to make a judgment on how close those substitutes are. Yeah? So if they are close substitutes, what then? Is it more elastic or less elastic if the substitutes are close? Right? Do you know what I mean by close?
Isn't distance?
Yeah. No, as in, similar. Yes. More elastic, absolutely. Right? It's like different versions of Coca-Cola. Right? They are very close substitutes to one another. Yeah? The next one that you see there, and this is one that we tend to, consider a lot, and definitely you will consider this potentially, with regards to your IAC1, and that is the idea of the degree of necessity. How necessary is it? If you cannot live without the product, it is essential to you. It is going to be more elastic or more inelastic? More inelastic. You'll pay whatever the price. So businesses know this, and we've talked about this with regards to behavioral economics. You want to make the product more addictive. You want to make people want the product and I have to have this one. Yeah? Whether that's through the medium of some particular part of the product itself, like an extra amount of caffeine in the product, if it's a consumable, or whether it's you've got a loyalty card but it only applies to that particular shop or that particular product. Yeah? Whatever it takes, make it more necessary. And the next one that you see there is the proportion of your income spent on the good. This is one that students struggle a bit with. All right? Everybody's got different incomes. I'm sure you are well aware of that. Okay? Yeah? And how much of your income do you spend? All right? And the classic example that we used all the way back in IGSI days is the box of matches. Okay? We used to sell boxes of matches for 15 cents. Double the price, 30 cents. Does anybody care? No. Because 30 cents is nothing in comparison to a lot of people's income. Does not matter. So that could be a 100% change in price. And it makes very little difference with regards to quantity demanded, if any. All right, so what proportion of your income are you spending? If you're buying a new car, That's going to be a much bigger proportion of your income. So you are going to be perhaps a little bit more considerate with regards to whether to buy it or not. Yeah. And the last one there, what is the last one? The last determinant? Dr. Strange tells us it's all about time.
The amount of time given for you to make the decision.
The more time we give you to make a decision, the more elastic the product becomes. Which again, we go back to behavioral economics, is why the businesses know it and they pressure you to make a decision as quick as you possibly can. Right now. Yeah? Okay?
Mr. David?
Yeah.
The more time we give,
The more elastic it is. Because you've got more time to do research, you've got more time to find another substitute, you've got more time to say, do I really need to buy this product or not?
That's why they use like behavioral economics to intentionally like.
Absolutely. And it happens all the time, and now that you're aware of it, you'll see it everywhere. Right? Because it is that common. So we've got those key determinants. We need to know all of them. We need to be able to apply all of them. We need to understand how they will work and how they will impact on elasticity. What happens if more substitutes come in the marketplace?
Become more elastic.
Becomes more elastic. Yeah. All right. So if you are a business, you want to get into a business and be the first in the business. Yeah. You then have a much more inelastic time because you're the only one selling the product. Yeah. Okay. And yes, Dr. Strange, completely AI generated. That is not clip art. That is not taken from Google Images. That is entirely created by AI. Pretty good, eh? Yeah. Okay, so let's have a look. Here we go. Applying the concepts. A good sees a 10% rise in quantity demanded and in response to a 5% fall in price. This would be expressed by the equation 10 over 5, which is 2, or 2%, 2, which means it is a coefficient that is elastic. How do you know it's elastic? Because it is greater than 1, more than proportional. Quantity demanded for a service rises by just 2% in response to a fall in price of a service by 20%. This would be expressed by the equation 2 over 20, which equals 0.1. Mathematically, that tells us it is inelastic because it is less than 1. Yeah? Okay. And the next one says the price of the good has risen from £5 to £6. The quantity demanded for the product has fallen by 20%. And again, if you look at the maths of it, it's 1/5 over 1/5. It's 20% over 20%. That is equal to 1. It is exactly proportional, hence unitary elastic. How long would it take you to do those calculations? A minute, you think? Okay. How do you do the calculations? Can you do them in your head? Are you that good at maths? Well, the last one you probably could. What about the other two? Could you do them in your head? You might be able to. And if you can, that speeds up your process a lot. The reason for saying that is you are going to need a what device? Calculator. You are going to need a calculator for paper 2 and the lucky few, paper 3. You must have one. Right? You do not have a calculator for paper 1. Does that mean you don't need to do calculations in paper 1? Yeah, pretty much. But you might choose to include them, depending on what you're talking about. All right, but then they come from here. Okay, are we clear on that? Yeah, cool. Now, the idea there, again, you don't have a cheat sheet, a formula sheet. So the PED calculation's in your brain, and then you do it on the calculator. The questions are going to be worth between 2 and 4 marks, depending on how they structure the questions. It might be a case study that you're reading and then have to work out the elasticity at the end. All right, it might be a multi-stage question, so a definition first, and then the application, and then the analysis of that, right? So it could be actually worth quite a bit of marks in paper 2 and possibly paper 3. So please do, you are going to need to practice this, and if the maths terrifies you, as it does some people, right? I've had students who've just looked at this and gone, percentage change, what? Right? And that's absolutely fine, because it's a skill, and like any other, you just need to practice it. All right, but if it's worth 4 marks in an exam, okay, it's IB, you get heaps of time to do it. All right, which means if you can do it in a quicker time than that, you've saved a whole lot of time for your analysis, and you've saved a whole lot of time for your policy evaluation that you're going to need to do. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, the next step is to apply it even further and discuss the idea of how PED impacts or interacts with the concept of revenue. Now, revenue is a concept we are going to come back to again if you are HL, and we're going to spend a little bit of time analysing revenue. But what you need to see is this model there. This is the relationship between the two. Where do you get maximum revenue?
In the middle.
In the middle, which is where?
Unit elastic.
Unit elastic. So unit elastic products are going to earn you the most revenue. All right. If you have an inelastic good, how can you increase your revenue?
Make it less addictive.
Make it less addictive if it's inelastic.
If you have a unit elastic goods,
If it's inelastic,
how can you make it?
how can you increase your revenue?
You just increase the price.
Increase your price. Whereas if it's an elastic good and you increase the price,
You're going
to decrease your revenue. Yeah. So if it's an elastic good, your pricing decision is going to be to have a sale, to do a discount.
It all makes sense.
Yeah. Which again you see this every day. Right? The elastic goods are the ones that are having the sales. Right? The inelastic goods don't need to have a sale or a discount.
If it's elastic, you decrease the price to the point of unit elastic.
Well, if you can figure that out, then you would, yeah.
Theoretically, right?
Yeah. If you could work that,
Inelastic, you increase it until the unit elastic point.
if you could work it out, yes. But the reality is you're not going to be able to.
So you basically first increase it, and then if it doesn't work well, you may decrease it later on.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It's a dynamic process. Your market is a dynamic process. You are making decisions based on your strategy, based on your goals. You're thinking to yourself, if I maximize my revenue, I'm going to get a bonus because I'm the CEO, or my shareholders want this amount of extra revenue this year, so I need to do this to achieve that. Yeah? Or I need to just survive as a business, in which case I have to get this bare level of revenue. If I don't get that level of revenue, then I'm out of business. Yeah? And that is, believe it or not, about 80% of businesses, that is exactly, at least 80%, that is exactly how they think. They have to get to this level of revenue, otherwise that's it, they're out of business. They don't get that, they're gone.
They just learn to survive.
Yeah. Survival is one of the most common strategies for particularly small businesses. Remember those really big businesses, the Googles, the Apples, the Amazons, those are huge, huge businesses. Coca-Cola, been around for over 100 years, yeah? These are businesses that they don't need to worry about profits and revenues so much because they are so big. There's no worries about them surviving in a business, in a marketplace. All right? When we get to the HL level, there was a period in history when Coca-Cola was battling with Pepsi, and at one point there was one substitute good, right, being produced by a competing firm, and Coca-Cola and Pepsi both had more money than most countries, and they had a look at this competing firm, and they actually had a deal. They made a deal with each other not to buy that company, because they knew that all of a sudden governments around the world would then turn on them, okay, because then it would have the appearance of there not being competition within that marketplace. Those are businesses, they don't need to worry about survival. Google does not need to worry about survival at all. Apple, as you are aware, can find $4 to $5 billion down the side of the couch to pay a tax bill. Yeah? Samsung, right, of ye of exploding cell phones, right, can settle a civil suit with regards to cell phones that cost them about $5 billion, right? How much sales and revenue they lost? They didn't blink an eye. Made not a jot of difference. Yeah, there would be some CEOs who possibly wouldn't get their bonuses, but they'd get them the next year. Right? You can have a business that is that big that actually performs quite badly, and the CEOs still get their bonuses because they've actually still met their targets with regards to revenue. So understanding this is quite an important one, and as I said, HL level learners, we're going to come back to this. But that model explains it really well. By the way, all of the slides for this, they're in the site in case you hadn't already tweaked to that. If you can't find them in the site, it may be that I didn't hit submit, which I'm thinking now I may not have hit submit, all right, in which case they're not on the site, but they will be soon. All right, and then you can have all the slides and the fun with them. Okay, now I'm trying to work out where the next one was. Here it is. What is the importance of PED for firm and for the government in decision making? Well, I've mentioned this already. Sales and revenue. All right. Okay. Bonus points if you know the gentleman on the right. You should all know the gentleman on the right. He's been to space. But don't call him a spaceman, he doesn't like that. Sales and revenue and profit. So those pricing decisions, and therefore the elastic nature of the product, the connection between the two is going to have an impact on all of that. So in a business sense, you must be very aware. What about for governments? The middle bit. What does it say? Impact of taxes. Governments, if they do anything, they tax things. If it moves, they tax it. If it doesn't move, they'll tax it still. Right? So they need to know whether they're going to get revenue from that tax and how much that revenue is going to be. So it is actually worth their while working out the elastic nature of the goods that they are putting the tax on. Now, if you've been in Malaysia a little while, you'll know that the Malaysian government has put 2 new taxes in place just recently. First one is a luxury goods tax. And the second one is an overseas imported tax, which is going to hit some small retailers blimmin' hard, I tell you that now. You're going to end up buying locally much more potentially, because it's, 500 ringgit? It's got to be over 500 ringgit, and then you don't get taxed. But if it's under 500 ringgit, then you get taxed on goods that have been imported. All right? So, yeah. But there are some small retailers out there who are already going, that came into effect on the 1st of January. All right, just letting you know. So what effect will it have? How big an effect will it have? How much revenue are they going to be able to earn from it? And quite clearly, if the good is inelastic, more revenue. So when you are making your argument in C1 about putting a tax on cigarettes or demerit goods, If you are making the argument also that that demerit good is inelastic, what happens to the revenue that the government can earn when they put a tax on it? That should be part of your analysis. All right? In fact, it could be part of your evaluation. All right? Now, again, see the picture of old Jeff there? Completely AI generated.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Wow.
Completely AI generated. And then there's this one. How much time? That much. Alright. Again, that's an AI one. I did a little style with that one. So that one was kind of cool. Right, so what can Jeff do? He can aim to make his products more inelastic, which we've said already. That's what they're going to aim to do. He could reduce the time that you have to consider any of your alternatives. We've talked about that. He could be making the price more in accordance with your individual preferences. Please, if you use any business case study in the future going forward, consider Amazon. Because he knows this stuff inside out, back to front and upside down. He doesn't always get it right. Doesn't. But I can tell you right now, they do some very clever things. All right, just think about buying things online with that one-click buy idea, which Amazon came up with.
I've lost so much money.
All right, click, bought. What? All right. Or better yet, the technology with your phones where you just look at your phone and you've bought it. No time to panic and think, oh no, I'm going to make a different decision. Bought, gone. Yeah? Those sorts of decisions, they get made very quickly. Jeff Bezos was doing subscription services, basically, for Amazon products, which turned out to be not a good idea and everybody hated the idea. But basically it's like, pre-ordering your milk. It just comes. You don't have to order it all the time. It just arrives like a subscription, right, through Amazon. Yeah? Because then you don't have to think about it. But then you're not thinking about it and you're not making that decision and he's earning all the revenue from it. So those decisions are really significant. All right, okay, ladies and gentlemen, what we're going to do is we're going to finish there. Okay, there is a little bit more to do, but we will pick this up next time. Now, please remember what I've said in the classroom. Okay, you've got 4 lessons over the next couple of weeks. My plan, now it's a plan. That doesn't mean it always will happen this way. My plan is for what I've said to happen. So today we had our introduction to elasticity. Right, our next lesson, which I believe is tomorrow. I am going to be wanting to look at what you have done so far on your IAC1. Okay? Because you've had Christmas, you've had EE pitches to worry about, and other pitches. Alright. Can I do the joke? Are you okay with me doing the joke?
Yes.
Yeah, with regards to your EE, you've got 99 problems, but a pitch ain't one.
Yes.
Yeah?
Took me a long
Okay.
time.
Took you a while, that one? Okay. Much apologies, right, if anyone was offended at that particular joke. Now, so I'm going to be looking at that, and if I am not satisfied that you have advanced enough in your writing for that, I am going to be emailing home. Right? Because it's important. Okay? Yeah. Yeah. Right. Otherwise, team, at Cornetta, you can pack yourselves away, and we will see you on another day.